Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Raleigh City Council, another virtual meeting. We are going to start with public comment this evening. And I'm going to remind everybody the rules of decorum. Please be kind. I know that's hard for some people, but that's the expectation that we have. The other thing is you will all be granted 3 minutes to speak. Please look at the timer and kind of keep time on that because I hate telling people your time is up. So having said that, we're going to start with Christina Jones.
Hi, Christina Jones, 8005 Finland Drive, District E. Good evening. It has been 1 year since this council dismantled citizens advisory councils with no replacement. I fully understand that you made your decision and we have to move on, but what are we moving on to? It's hard to jump on the bandwagon with you when you've spent the last year avoiding the conversation. I continue to invite you all to our individual CAC meetings as well as our RCAC meetings to further explain what your vision is for citizen engagement. And as we continue to learn what Mr. Fern's ideas are for the next generation of citizen engagement, we realize that the vacuum you created needs to be filled now, not in 6 months. For this reason, RCAC will continue to focus on the education of city government. Last month, I discussed accountability and how important it is to recognize mistakes in an effort to correct them. In that vein, I have spent the last few weeks brainstorming how we can become a better organization. Our January RCAC meeting, along with the Chief of Staff of Raleigh, centered around educating residents about the structure of Raleigh's government. I have a request in for city staff to attend all of our 2021 meetings from every department that serves the city of Raleigh. This will be a starting place for us to help educate more Raleigh residents on what it is our government does for us. I anxiously await confirmation from the Chief of Staff and ask for your assistance in that effort. I will keep you updated as I continue to join you every public comment section for an RCAC update. We have 3 requests from Council for the month of February. 1, if there was a job description for your position, what would you include in it to reflect the complexities of your job? 2, what stakeholders do you currently engage with outside of the appointed boards and commissions? And 3, How do you quantify the appropriate amount of citizen engagement? I understand that this list can lead to very long answers, but if you're interested in reaching out to me directly to review, my email is COLL_CHRISTINA@yahoo.com. Lastly, I would like to remind everyone, including current council, that RCAC will be holding our February meeting on February 17th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Please find us on Facebook for our Zoom link. All are encouraged to attend as we will be meeting with 3 candidates for the upcoming municipal election on October 5th, 2021. If any current council members seeking re-election would like to speak, please feel free to reach out to me and I will add you to the agenda. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you. Next, we have Richard Johnson.
Richard Johnson, 3225 Oak Grove Circle. At the January 19th meeting of council, a local resident presented accurate facts, statistics, and quotes made by Councilor Nicole Stewart, including her infamous desire to right-size voices she did not want to hear. Councilor Stewart responded to these facts by smirking, rolling her eyes, shaking her head no in an exaggerated manner, and mouthing words that I assume were nana nana boo boo. Anyone can watch her performance by going to the City of Raleigh website. It was an immature display of Trump-style buffoonery. It certainly broke City Council's code of conduct that Mayor Baldwin repeatedly cites against those who disagree with her. Councilor Stewart frequently mentions her 2 school-age children when campaigning and during council meetings. What kind of example is she setting for them? Is this the way she teaches them to act whenever they hear facts they don't like? Just attack the messenger, smirk, roll your eyes, shake your head no, and mouth nana nana boo boo. Councilor Stewart, you owe Mr. Niles an apology for your behavior. Not to be outdone, Mayor Baldwin showed an appalling level of ignorance about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Martin Luther King Day holiday when she also attacked Mr. Niles for telling the truth. Dr. King's life work was speaking truth to power, and that was exactly what Mr. Niles was doing on January 19th. Mayor Baldwin has a history of making mean-spirited, snide remarks to anyone who speaks out with a different point of view than hers. In fact, she just did it at the start of this meeting. Where is the kindness from her that she demands from others? Is this how she acts at work for Barnhill Contracting? In the cushy job they installed her in shortly after they got another big contract from the city, multi-millions. Barnhill should sign up Mayor Baldwin for diversity and anger management training. Mayor Baldwin, you owe an apology to Mr. Niles, the citizens of Raleigh, and most importantly, the family and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Next, we have Donna Bailey.
And Rosemont. I wanted to bring up a few weeks ago at one of the rezoning meetings, Mayor Baldwin was commenting and praising one of the developers who had reached out to the community and got a consensus. Well, actually that developer came to our CAC meeting and we worked with the developer and came up with, that is what CACs do. But as you may recall, the mayor and councilors planned in secret and voted with no citizen input and no public notice. If you remember, that was not on the agenda, to defund all the CACs. So on one hand, she's praising the developers for great citizen engagement, but all they did was come to a CAC meeting, which we still have. Unfortunately, many of the CACs are not still meeting. Just to give a brief overview, they were started in 1974 by Raleigh's first and only African-American mayor, Clarence Leitner, in an effort to give Black Raleigh citizens a stronger voice. That the CACs were started. Defunding the CACs took away the voices that this council says it values. Only 2 of the CACs in Black Raleigh are still meeting. The rest have fallen away without the support of the city. What has happened to all the other CACs and to the voices of their residents? As you know, I believe this was a huge mistake to remove a good avenue for citizen voices, but it is not for us to judge what was in the hearts of mayor and councilors 1 year ago today when they voted to suppress the Black voices. But your act of claiming white privilege as the excuse for your actions is reprehensible and calls out for an abject apology for your white privilege blindness, not only to the Black community voices you suppress, but to all CAC volunteers whose voices you suppressed almost a year ago and have yet to atone for in any way, shape, or form. I do hope you will be planning an apology so we can begin to rebuild trust with a renewed commitment to anti-racism, equity, and empowering authentic grassroots community engagement in Raleigh. Thank you.
Next, we have Ross McLaren.
Hi, my name is Ross McLaren. I'm the president of our HOA, Carriages Townhomes in North Raleigh. This is a request for the City of Raleigh to formally consider adopting the current private roads located within our community. We've had some meetings with some of the engineers and we understand what's involved. We know we need some repairs to our roads and we have the funds to do so. So we're asking that this project be formally chartered so that the teams can go and look at this a little bit further and see if we can make this happen. That's all. Thank you.
City Manager, could we have staff follow up with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Councilor Buffkin?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say to Mr. McLaren, I spoke with another member of the neighborhood and staff is, of course, working on it. They've already met with some folks out there and I'm willing to help you out and look forward to working with on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Stephanie Brown.
Mayor, I was unable to get Stephanie Brown on the phone.
Okay. Next, we have Calla Wright.
Mayor, Calla Wright emailed earlier today and withdrew from public comment this evening.
Okay. Next, we have Catherine Jones. We actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers who want to talk about tiny homes. So those are the next 4 speakers. We'll start with Catherine.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Catherine Jones. I live at 12217 Chastain Drive. We are here tonight representing Tiny Living North Carolina. Our organization was excited to hear that the mayor and council expressed interest in making it easier to live tiny here in Raleigh. We are speaking tonight to say thank you and to let you know that we feel strongly that the next best step to take is to legalize tiny homes on wheels as ADUs and within tiny villages. As I mentioned, I'm a resident of Raleigh. I have been since I was born. This is my hometown. I call it a town because when I was a child, that's what it felt like to me. I remember the St. Patrick's Day parades, being given so much candy by the volunteers as they walked by, it felt like Halloween. The Pioneer Days program at the History Museum, making wax candles and writing with ink. I grew up being able to walk to Optimus Pool in a house my parents sold in 2001 for $143,000. Last year, that house sold for $351,000. It's not even 1,600 square feet. My husband and I pursued buying a home, but with student loans and car payments, the bank wouldn't finance very much. So, with few affordable housing options, we began building our tiny house ourselves just over a year ago. It's in Johnston County, though, because we couldn't figure out how to live in Raleigh. We hoped that with it being a tiny home on wheels, that we would have more placement options for parking when we had the opportunity to move back to my hometown. However, so far, that hasn't been the case. I spent nearly my entire life living here in Raleigh. I've watched it grow, change, and embrace a number of new things with positive results, typically, that always come around. I'm hoping that since I've embraced this town my whole life, and I've lived here nearly my whole life, that Raleigh will in turn embrace me and my growing family. Please let me and my tiny house on wheels move here. Help us do this the right way, the legal way. That's all.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, we have Peter. Peter, I apologize in advance. Chakcha?
It's Peter Hahai. Thank you.
Oh man,
Peter
I was
Hahai.
really off. I apologize, Peter.
No worries. All my life. Peter Hahai, 1017 Mangum Street, Wake County. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, by the way. We are here tonight representing Tiny Living, North Carolina. Our organization was excited to hear the mayor and council again express interest in making it easier to live tiny in Raleigh. We are speaking tonight to say thank you and let you know that we feel strongly that the next best step to take to legalize tiny houses on wheels or movable tiny houses as ADUs and within tiny villages. I have lived in a tiny house on wheels, also known as a movable tiny house, with my wife for 3 years. We are now mortgage free and have energy bills 1/4 of what they were previously. Prior to that, I was a resident of Raleigh for 10 years, but was unfortunately forced out because of my decision to live in an energy efficient, intentionally sized dwelling with flexibility in mind. I set out to live in this house and started building on a residential lot in Northeast Raleigh. I reached out to the building department and spoke to numerous inspectors and was not able to proceed with the Raleigh Building Department. Due to a zoning ordinance, I was kicked out of Raleigh mid-build, but politely was given 30 days to prepare to move. After finishing, we made further attempts to be in the city we love with no luck. This is a great time to get this going, but not the first time mayor and council thought this was worth a look. In 2017, when council member Baldwin said she believes tiny houses would be a great alternative to help address affordable housing in the city, which prompted me to email the city to help city staff with no response. The solutions are not very challenging. Reducing lot size minimums, allowing flag lots, allowing movable tiny homes as ADUs, and a few more changes will provide so much more affordable housing in a growing city. Let's get this done. I will not give up on Raleigh. Please don't give up on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we have Mary Gloogly.
Yes, hello, thank you so much. So I wanted to just start with our kind of group
Mary,
organization.
could you give your address, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. My name is Mary and I'm at 2600 and a half Wade Avenue. So yeah, I wanted to basically just kind of start off with our group motto. We're all here together. So there's 4 of us representing the group tonight. And our organization was really excited to hear mayor and council express interest in making it easier to live here in Tiny. Live Tiny in Raleigh. Peter and I had meetings with Nicole and with Patrick, and this was sometimes even prior to, you guys with your new roles. And it was just so exciting to be able to reach out, talk to people, and actually felt cared about. I've never voted. I've never cared about local politics. And I can't tell you my excitement when all of the old heads were quickly conceded and you guys came forward. So I have so much hope, and I'm really excited to work with you guys on legalizing tiny homes on wheels and movable tiny homes. What we're going to do with our group is we're going to bring a lot of true stories of people that are living tiny now and wanting to live tiny, and why this varies on so many demographics across so many situations and how this helps them. We have 1,700 members and counting in just a year asking how do we make this legal? Where do we make this legal? I can't afford housing. We want to work with you guys. We want to give you our resources. We've done a lot of work in the past year, and we really cannot wait to show you guys what we've done and work side with you. It's going to be mutually beneficial to you guys. It's going to, not only just tackle the affordable housing problem, but also the lack of housing. And that's just one thing. You can walk away from your terms, in office, if nothing else, saying, I gave dignified living to single mothers, college grads with loads of debt, even elderly who just want to spend their final days with their children in their backyard. All this is going to be possible with movable tiny homes and tiny homes on wheels. And we want to be with you guys. We want to make this happen, like cities like Wilmington, Asheville. There's also other cities that they're doing. Durham, even Durham have done it, and they are progressive. I want to continue to brag about this council that I was so excited to vote for the first time, about the change, about the progressiveness, the positivity. And we want to work with you to make that happen. We're not just going to leave you and say, hey, make it legal. We're going to do this with you guys. So
Thank you, Mary.
so much. Okay, thank you.
3 minutes are up. Thank you so much. Next, we have Jen Truman.
Good evening, y'all. Jen Truman here, 1928 Sierra Drive. Good to talk to you, and to have another chance to speak up loudly in support of housing and affordable housing, missing middle housing. You guys have heard this from me a lot, but I'm happy to speak alongside my friends from Tiny Living NC tonight. We were really excited to hear Mayor and Council continue to express interest in living tiny, and reaffirm that at the beginning of the year this year. Thank you, Mayor. We really want to speak tonight because we feel that the next best step is to legalize tiny homes on wheels. That would be both as ADUs and in tiny villages. Over the past year, y'all have taken important steps forward, and we thank you for those. We've made it easier to build ADUs by removing the onerous overlay. You've provided density incentives through the cottage court development. And simultaneously, North Carolina has made changes to the building code, and actions by the Code Council and General Assembly have made tiny homes on foundations on their own lots and as ADUs simpler and more legal to build all across our state. Those are all great things, but there are still challenges. Minimum lot sizes, the cost of utility connections, the cost and number of inspections, parking requirements, those all still drive up the cost and impact the availability of small and tiny homes. Staff is probably going to tell you all of that, but we wanted to come and speak tonight because we think there's another simple step, and that's to legalize tiny homes on wheels, movable tiny homes, or as we fondly call them, those, THOW. Tiny homes on wheels allow for additional housing on smaller budgets. Our group is honestly full of those owners simply looking for a place to park. Right now, they can't do that in Raleigh. So let me just use myself as an example of the impact of what it would mean to legalize those. It'll take me a couple more years before I can save up enough money to qualify for a loan to build the ADU I've told you many times I want to build in my own backyard. But if those were legal, I could invite any one of these friends to park in my backyard tomorrow. We could have that on any open lot or parking lot, where we could invite those and create quick, simple, affordable housing, tiny villages, great places with dignity for people to live. So we've been working with experts about tiny living from around the country and around the state where they've been able to enact ordinances for tiny homes on wheels. And we think that would make the biggest difference. So we'd love to be part of the conversation. As Mary said, this is not just a one-time demand. This is something we want to bring forward to you guys as a discussion, and provide resources and expertise that we have friends from around the country and state that are working with, and to help take this next step to make Raleigh more tiny friendly. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Jen. City Manager, could we have staff look at this issue and kind of tell us a little more about what other communities are doing, pros and cons, and just learning more. What we've currently asked is for staff to come to us with a plan for a tiny home pilot community village, looking at two different options or maybe both. One, something on city-owned land, the other something that a developer brings forward to us, that we could look at ways where we could be more, how can we say this, friendly. So if they could also look at this issue, I know somebody mentioned flag lots, obviously minimum lot sizes and parking requirements, but would like to know more about the pros and cons.
Absolutely, Mayor, we will.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have Doug Johnson.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Talk about Dix Park.
How did you guess? This is Doug Johnston, 120 Forest Road. And my purpose is really to give some catalytic effect, if that's possible, to a group that's already totally energized. So I'm doing a quick summary tonight of where I hope most of you have had a chance to read some of the material I have, and then I'll be sending two other items tomorrow, which will put us in place for thinking about how much more we can do to give another shot in the arm to our efforts with Dix Park. And that sounds strange because right now the efforts are superlative. I mean, at every level. Next slide, please. This is a favorite quote of mine from Frederick Law Olmsted. And I'm suggesting a new range of what we see Dix Park is. Next slide, please. And that's the edges. The edges including the Fuller Heights, which is on the way in superlative fashion. Next slide, please. This may not be what Dix Park becomes, but if we're doing a moonshot, and I'm still a big fan of that idea, it could be something like this. Next slide, please. We have to remember the park is not the thing itself, but everything around it. The immediate frontages are very important as an active and complex interchanging area. And then there's the zone of park, what I call park actuated growth, which is where the excitement that brings the park into the rest of the city begins. Next slide, please. You're familiar with these two because they're both examples, and I will be sending an explanation of this curious combination of slides in the next week or two. I think you might enjoy it. Next slide, please. When everything works together, that's when you have a complete park. And that includes all of these other features that are really park assets. Next slide. Dix Park, most people think is 306 acres. It's actually more than 1,500 acres when you include the greenways and adjacent parks and areas that could be part of the park. Next slide, please. Michael Van Valkenburg and Matt Urbanski have a talent we are really fortunate to have, and the wisdom of selecting that caliber should never go unnoticed. This is the sense that our park will be much more than the 306 acres. Next slide, please. There are parts of Centennial Campus, and we have the rezoning coming up for a planned development, which will give us a chance to think very seriously about their contribution. Then there's Boylan Heights, Governor Moorhead School, and these are just the beginning. Next slide, please.
Mr. Johnston, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could somebody please tell me what the time is on this?
I think it's up.
Because I can't see the timer.
I don't see it either.
Okay.
But that's all I have. Just take a look at what I've sent. I hope this will bring you up to date, and I'm excited about going forward with the friends I've made and city staff and council and everything else. Bye now.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Really appreciate you being here. Okay, now we're going to start the public hearing portion of our meeting. First, we have a petition annexation, 500 Beckholm Street in District B. No one has signed up to speak.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, everyone. Christopher Golden here with Planning and Development. The annexation you have before you is at 5,000 Beckham. It's 27 acres roughly. It's another build out of, or another phase of build out of the 5401 North planned development, where the petitioner or the owner of the property wishes to construct 83 single family homes. It's contiguous it's contiguous to city limits, completely surrounded by them, in fact. It's within Raleigh's ETJ. If it's annexed, it'll end up in District B. There are water and sewer, which are right around the property. If you have any questions, I'm certainly here to answer them. And we have a slide presentation as well that can answer any of the questions you might have.
Okay, do we have any questions on this? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Councillor Cox?
Yes, this is in District B, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the annexation.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Branch, all in favor? Okay, that was unanimous, clerk. Thank you. Next, we have street closing 14/20/20 on Sawyer Road. We have no one here speaking in opposition.
This is Jason Myers with the Transportation Department. I do want to bring one issue to the attention of council because it's a part of the resolution, and that is that there are some utilities that are in some of this right-of-way, and if those utilities remain, then there will need to be an easement. But otherwise, this is consistent with the plan, and I can answer any questions you might have about this this proposal.
Do we have any questions on this, Councilmember Branch?
As far as access to those homes, there's two on the back side that I was just wondering about.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I could hear your question clearly, sir.
Okay, of Sawyer Circle, the way it's located, there are two homes there. And I just want to make sure that those homes are good. I'm actually looking at the property at 1201 and 1200.
I understand. The next slide shows a site plan that was submitted for this this site. This is a part of the Brown Birch redevelopment, which would demolish the entire section of this and replace it with these homes and a new extension of Sawyer Road on a slightly different alignment.
I'm good.
Okay, I am going to open the hearing and close the hearing, provided that those in support are okay with that. Okay, and I will accept a motion.
Move for approval with the needed utility easements.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart has seconded that. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That was unanimous, clerk. Next, we have street closing 15-2020 Mulberry Street Alley. No one has signed up to speak on this.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't hear the beep. This is in the Mordecai neighborhood, and it's an unimproved alley that touches 4 different properties. This is consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan. There is no utility easements necessary on this, and I can answer any other questions you might have.
Do we have any questions? No one has signed up to speak on this. I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do I have a motion to approve? That would be Councilmember Branch. Do I have a second? Councilmember Fort, all in favor? Okay, that was unanimous, clerk. Thank you. The next item, we have rezoning Z2820 Glenwood Avenue. And each side will have 8 minutes to present. I wanted to confirm something before we begin, Beth. Larry Miller has signed up to speak in opposition to the case. I want to confirm that that was accurate.
That is what he entered in the form, and I have not heard anything otherwise. Clerk, have you?
Has he signed up? Is he on the phone? Has he signed up?
He is. Would you like to listen to?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you like to hear from him now? He is on the phone.
No, I'd like to hear the presentation first, but I just wanted clarification on that. So we will hear, I guess, from Jamie to start. Oh, staff to start, and then we will hear from Jamie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bynum Walter Planning and Development. Our first rezoning case tonight is Z2820 at 400 and 410 Glenwood Avenue. This is a request to rezone just over 2 acres from OX7 with a shopfront frontage to DX40 conditional use zoning district. I would note that the DX40 is a little bit misleading. The case has been conditioned to a height closer to 20 stories at its highest. The request is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission recommends approval, as does the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. A quick look at the conditions on the site. So they have prohibited a handful of uses. They have promised a preservation easement on the original 1928 Creamery building, as well as the 1940s addition. They provided shopfront frontage on the 400 Glenwood Avenue parcel. They've also provided for a city bike share station that would hold at least 4 bicycles on the site. Here's a look at the site. So the historic Creamery building in the upper left-hand corner, aerial view in the lower left, you can see the historic structure, and the 40s addition only occupies a portion of the site. Look at the historic landmark boundary. So again, doesn't take up the entirety of the rezoning site. And the preservation easement is this area shown in orange. So that's a portion of the historically designated area. This is a view of the materials approved by the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. Again, that 20-story height limit on the portion of the site that is proposed for new construction, and some information on the right-hand side there about setbacks and distance between existing and proposed construction. So residential density increasing here significantly, as well as the maximum number of units, the office square footage, and increasing significantly. The retail square footage does not increase markedly. This is consistent with the future land use map designation of Central Business District. It's also consistent with the with the urban form map designations of downtown and core transit area. The shopfront frontage that they've provided and the preservation easement create that consistency. A number of consistent policies. It is consistent with the plan overall. And then the one outstanding issue that staff would suggest to you might be that the applicant offer, in addition to the bike dock, the 4 bicycles that would go with the dock. Again, the Planning Commission and the Raleigh Historic District Commission both recommend approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Let me just hold on one second. Do we have any questions for Bynum? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. First, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street on behalf of the property owner, Turnbridge Equities, and Jason Davis with Turnbridge is on the line tonight as well. I understand there's an additional speaker, so I'll limit my comments and leave some time on the clock for him. But our team is also on the line and includes Fred Belladin from the local historic architecture team at Clearscapes and Morris Adjmi team with Morris Adjmi Architects, focusing on the interplay of new construction and historic architecture throughout the U.S. If our presentation could be brought up, please. Some of the work of this sophisticated team will be featured on the presentation before you. But after a year of stakeholder meetings and obtaining interim historic approvals from the city, we are so pleased to be presenting this project, which preserves the historic Pine Street Creamery building and creates a new mixed-use development with active street retail presence on the balance of the site. Our community engagement began in January of 2020 and it included over 18 meetings with stakeholder and neighborhood groups, including the Glenwood South Neighborhood Collaborative. In these meetings, we heard a strong desire to preserve the creamery and to create more street activation and pedestrian connectivity with active daytime uses in a manner that gave the creamery sufficient breathing room from new development. As a result of those meetings, the historic commitments in this case are dramatically different from any other 40-story zoning you've seen in 2 key ways. We are committing to a preservation easement of the entire character-defining elements of the creamery building. And second, we pursued a 2-phased approach to the certificate of appropriateness required for the 410 parcel to obtain early COA approval of massing and setbacks of this historic landmark site. And Bynum just showed that slide. That approval limits the entire landmark parcel to 20 stories or less and leaves only 15% of the project site eligible to be built at 40 stories, which is the smaller 400 block that is not historic. This is an extraordinary self-imposed limit on substantial work, based on substantial work with the city staff, and is a historically appropriate request in an area of Raleigh growing along the BRT line. Next slide, please. The development team set an early goal to preserve the character-defining elements of the creamery building and focus much of the new development and height on existing surface parking lots and on the 400 parcel. The DX40CU request is consistent with these goals, as well as a downtown mixed-use designation in the future land use central business district, which is intended for the most intense uses and heights in the city. It's also consistent with the core transit designation on the urban form map, which supports heights up to 40 stories within a quarter mile from the proposed West Street BRT route and transit stop shown toward the right of your screen. Next slide, please. In the larger context of downtown, that West Street route has become a spine of new growth from the warehouse district to P Street. The pink overlays in this slide highlight the site zoned 40 and 20 stories, and the letters show some of the more recent 20 and 40 story approvals. You can see height forming as the comp plan encouraged, beginning with the Dillon, Russ Bus, and Cam in the warehouse district, and extending north along the future BRT line, that red dash line, to Smoky Hollow and our site closer to P Street. Next slide, please. This shows the perspective of how that height has clustered along West Street, again along the red dash line at its intersection with Peace, including a massing of 40-story approvals closer to the future transit stop to the left of your screen. This project ties into that growth, providing an opportunity for new jobs, homes, and street activation where surface parking lots lie today. Next slide, please. When we refer to the character-defining elements of the creamery, this means the 1928 and 1947 portions at Glenwood and Tucker, which inform the historic designation and are shown on the left half of your screen. The RHDC and COA committee strongly supported preservation of these. Removal of the later additions toward the center of the site, which are shown on screen right, allows us to provide more street activation and open the site up for pedestrian connectivity, as we heard early on from the neighborhood groups, including the Glenwood South group. Next slide, please. The design team envisioned that in its place, a multimodal bike ped alley called a Wooner could provide a mid-block connection and room for a public plaza. These images show that alley concept in similar revitalization projects in DC and New York, some of which were designed by our team. Next slide, please. This aerial highlights how disconnected the parcels are from the street today and where surface parking provides an opportunity to reorganize the site. Next slide. And this slide shows that rearrangement to pull the parking and building massing toward the rail corridor, preserve the creamery, and place new uses along the rail line and the 400 block, and open up the middle of the site for the new Wooner Finn Plaza for connections north-south and to Glenwood. The 400 parcel is hatched because it is part of the zoning and part of the 40-story request, but it is not part of the historic landmark designation, so it's not subject to the COA. Next slide, please. As Bynum mentioned, we applied for the Phase 1 COA to determine the massing, setback, and step-back restrictions during the zoning process and received unanimous approval in one meeting. This shows the approved Phase 1 COA, public plaza, separation of new construction, setbacks, and those setbacks from Tucker. Importantly, it limits the height to 20 stories on new construction and 2 to 3 stories for the creamery for all of the historic site. This means that 85% of the overall project will be 20 stories or less, and 50% of the overall site will be 2 stories or less. The only potential for 40 stories is on that 400 block, which is really only 15% of the site and is not historic. The Phase 2 COA will be required at site plan, which will set out materials and architectural details for the new construction, which will form an extra layer of regulation on top of the zoning request before you tonight. Next slide, please. This shows the massing of how setbacks will be pulled off of Tucker Street, which was important to the RHDC and the COA to prevent view sheds and pedestrian traffic on Tucker. Next slide, please. We invested in a year worth of community engagement and historic approvals up front because it was important that our project reflected our development goals. We sought the parallel Phase 1 COA approval early because we wanted to deliver more certainty about the preservation of this landmark and limits of new development. Next slide, please. That investment delivered meaningful conditions in addition to the COA. The request provides the significant public benefits of historic preservation, public gathering space, and supporting alternative means of transportation around and within the site. Next slide, please. As set forth in the staff report, the request is consistent with the future land use map and numerous downtown comp plan policies regarding mixed use, pedestrian-friendly development, and historic preservation. In sum, this historic preservation included in this 40-story designation is far beyond any request the city has seen. We request your vote to approve tonight and are happy to answer any of your questions. And if the rest of my time could be yielded to the other gentleman, please.
Next, we will hear from, I guess, Larry Miller. So, Jamie, you're through your presentation from now?
I am, but I was informed another gentleman had signed up to speak in support.
Okay, do you want to wait until after we hear from the person who is opposed? I would recommend that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next, we'll hear from, if we could reset the clock. We know we have 55 seconds left. We could hear from Larry Miller, please.
Good evening, Mayor and the City Council members. My name is Larry Miller, and I live at 510 Glenwood Avenue, less than 1 block from the Creamery building. I'm president of the Glenwood South Neighborhood Collaborative. GSNC is composed primarily of residents or businesses located in Glenwood South. From October 2nd through October 23rd, 2020, GSNC conducted a survey to gather views on the zoning amendment. This was after the owner of the property, Turnbridge Equities, had obtained approval from the Raleigh Historic Development Commission for the proposed massing and height on the historic property. We obtained 252 responses, of which 121 supported the proposed amendment and 131 opposed the proposed amendment. That is why I am here in opposition. I am reflecting the results of the survey while it is not scientific, it reflects the views of members of our community. A more detailed evaluation of the survey is contained in my written comments and in the attached survey results. GSNC has been an active participant in the Certificate of Appropriateness process, which is progressing on a parallel track before the RHDC. We've expressed support for the proposal of Turnbridge Equities to preserve the historic Pine State Creamery building and to limit its massing and height proposal on a historic site to 20 stories. Indeed, if Turnbridge Equities' proposal were limited to the 20 stories proposed on the historic site, GSNC would be in full support of the proposed zoning amendment. However, it is the non-historic parcel located at 400 Glenwood Avenue to which this rezoning for 40 stories would be problematic. Because Turnbridge Equities has apparently limited the height of the development proposed on the historic property, the only parcel left on which 40 stories could be built is at 400 Glenwood Avenue. That parcel is too small to support a 40-story structure. A 40-story building at this small parcel would look like a pencil. Moreover, a 40-story building on Glenwood Avenue would be inconsistent with the existing Glenwood South neighborhood. We disagree with the staff evaluation at page 11 of under their compatibility. The staff incorrectly states that, quote, the required preservation of the creamery will push the bulk of the new construction back toward the railroad line and away from Glenwood Avenue. While this might be true for the historic property located at 410 Glenwood, it ignores the fact that 400 Glenwood at the corner of Glenwood Avenue and North Street is not historical property and is not covered by the COA application. Finally, GSNC notes that once zoning on this parcel is amended, Turnbridge Equities would be free to sell the property to another party who might not be inclined to follow through on the plans of the current owner. Such an event is not unprecedented. Accordingly, GSNC asked the City Council to take into consideration the views reflected in the survey conducted by GSNC and disapprove this zoning proposal. If you could go on the screen, if you could go back to page 1. So this shows that of the 252 respondents, 70% of the residents or the respondents who either lived in Glenwood South or downtown. If you could go to page 2, it shows that 52% were opposed to the rezoning and 48% were in support of it. This differs from a survey that we conducted a little over a year ago in connection with phase 3 of the Kane Realty development at Sleepy Hollow. In that survey, there was a 4-to-1 advantage in supporting the proposed amendment. This goes to show that the residents of downtown and Glenwood are not opposed to 40-story buildings. In fact, we embrace them. There are many locations in Glenwood South and other parts of downtown where 40 stories would be appropriate. The corner of Glenwood Avenue and North Street on a small plot is not one of those locations. If you go to page 3, the top 2 reasons for supporting the proposed amendment include walkability, and the urban development growth is preferable to suburban sprawl, and economic benefit to neighborhoods due to increase in the office workers and residents. On page 5, the top 2 reasons opposed to this amendment include the height is incompatible with the neighborhood and the increased traffic congestion that would be caused. As you are all familiar with Glenwood South, our streets and sidewalks are quite narrow. And if you're going to approve this, we need I'm suggesting that we need a new streetscape plan. The one we have for Glenwood South is over 2 decades old, and we really need to plan for the future because there are other zoning amendments coming up for Glenwood South. Thank you for the opportunity to present my views, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, if we could set the timer at 55 seconds, we will go back to the resident who signed up to speak in support. Was that Dylan, perchance?
Madam Mayor, there are a couple people signed up to speak in support, and Dylan is on here.
Who else is signed up to speak in support?
We have Lucas Posada, I believe Morris and Fred, Jamie already noted. We have Brittany Macumber, Jason Davis, she noted, and then a Tyler O'Farrell and Dylan.
I think that she was specifically referencing a resident who had signed up to speak. Jamie, is Lucas part of your team?
1 second, let me unmute her.
Mayor, I think the other person was Dylan Boturse, the last one on the list. I think that's the one that is not a part of the team.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, so then we have 55 seconds for Dylan to speak. Is he on the line?
Hello, Mayor Baldwin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the 55 seconds. City council members, city staff, thank you very much. My name is Dylan Bowders. My wife and I, Carla, reside at 522 South Harrington Street. You may know that as the Fairweather in downtown Raleigh. We used to live at the West very recently, and of course know Larry and the Glenwood South Collaborative very well. Love what Larry is doing over there. We did participate in the survey as well in support of this project. I do want to mention that having spoken to the developer, the architects, the supporting architects, and others associated with this project, thrilled with everything that Jamie presented and everything that they're looking to do with and for the Glenwood South neighborhood. I think it's needed for the Glenwood South neighborhood to mature and grow into a vibrant district that's not just a bar scene. That was, and I think for a lot of people that live in Glenwood South area, that's the only real thorn on the side, and we love Glenwood South. A few things that I want to talk about very quickly in response to the top two concerns, height being one of those. Of course, we've got Smoky Hollow Phase 3 across the street that was approved. We've got the Rust Bus Station. We've got the Zimmer lot that is. I'm sorry.
Dylan, I'm sorry, your time's up.
Wow, that was quick. Okay, I support this and tiny homes. Thank you very much.
Thanks for getting in the tiny homes too. Okay, we will go bring this back to council now. I'm going to ask if there are any questions first. Okay, have that said, I'm going to close the hearing. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Councilor Fort.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 2nd, 2021, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Do we have a second? Councilor Melton has seconded that. All in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? No. Clerk, that was unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have rezoning Z2920 West South Street. No one has signed up to speak in opposition.
Mayor, I think Ms. Walters is speaking, but I believe she's muted.
Story of our lives, right?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Great.
Yes.
All right. So this is a request to rezone 1.32 acres from downtown mixed-use district 5-story height limit and urban limited frontage to the same base district with a 20-story height limit, the same frontage and conditions. The request is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission recommends unanimous approval. An aerial view of the site, you can see we're southwest of the Red Hat Amphitheater and just on the west southwest side of the railroad tracks. A couple of views of the site. The conditions proposed here limit uses and set 2 development scenarios. Basically, they're limiting development to respond to concerns about traffic, and so they've set 2 scenarios that they might choose to develop under. The residential density is increasing, almost more than doubling, and as does the maximum number of units. The office square footage increases significantly, and the retail square footage also increases. This is consistent with the central business district designation on the future land use map, also consistent with the downtown west gateway area plan and the urban form map, consistent with the plan overall. Just a couple of inconsistent policies here. And again, the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the hearing?
Anybody have a question?
I'll have one for the applicant after they present.
Okay. We will open up the hearing then.
Great. Good evening, Mayor. This is Michael Birch. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Well, Bynum did such a wonderful job with the presentation. We'll just ask Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Branch if I can answer his question, that would be great.
All right.
Councilmember Branch.
All right, thank you. My question is, are you working with is the developer working with any of the neighbors around there to make sure that there's no negative impact? I asked this question because there is some affordable housing directly across the street.
Yes, sir, Councilor Branch. So member of the RHA staff was present for our neighborhood meeting, and I've had follow-up conversations with some board members. Also, I interacted with their development director earlier as kind of part of their redevelopment effort. I think y'all have been briefed on that. They have hired consultants and are looking at redeveloping Heritage Park there. So yes, we will continue to stay in contact with them as we proceed with development, and also will be, supportive of whatever they plan to do on their site when they could bring that forward.
Okay, thank you. And I hope that support means that of those 300 units that are built, maybe a few of them can help some of those residents.
Understood.
Does anybody else have questions? Because if we're ready to move forward with this, I would be ready to move forward with it. Anybody else have questions? Michael, if you're okay, I'm going to close the hearing then.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this? Councilmember Branch?
Yes. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 20th, 2021, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adopted and effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
Okay. Seconded by Councilmember Stewart. All in favor, please raise your hands. Clerk, that was unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have rezoning Z3520.
This is a request to rezone 4 parcels that total just under 2 acres from a combination of R4 and R6 with a special residential parking overlay district to residential mixed use with a 3-story height limit and conditions with that same special residential parking overlay district. The request is inconsistent with future land use map. but consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. The Planning Commission recommends approval by a split vote of 6-3, which largely reflects concerns raised by neighbors during the Planning Commission's deliberation. This is located on the south side of Wade Avenue between Gardner and Brooks. And this is a look at the site from Wade Avenue. So they have provided some conditions here. Development is limited to a maximum of 24 units. Only residential and special uses are permitted. They've prohibited dormitory, fraternity, sorority, and also vinyl siding. They have specified some particular building materials, some architectural details, and then they have also offered additional stormwater specifications beyond what's required by code. And they have specified a method of trash pickup as well as fence or wall along the southern property boundary adjacent to a couple of parcels there. So what's happening here, the residential density is increasing. The maximum total number of units that would be allowed is increasing. The front setback is reducing. The side setback and some of the side rear setback both in the side setback increases, but the sum of the side rear setback, the rear setback decreases. Consistent with the plan overall, a number of consistent policies, 2 inconsistent policies, the future land use map issue that we talked about already. And when that is inconsistent, the conditional use district consistency policy always comes with that. And if this is approved, it would require a future land use map amendment to change the designation for these parcels to moderate density residential. Again, the Planning Commission recommends approval. Those opposed votes were concerned about traffic on Wade Avenue and insufficient buffer to adjacent properties. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing? I know we have folks signed up on both sides of this case tonight.
Questions for staff? Okay, I will open up the hearing. We will hear first from the applicants. A reminder that there's 8 minutes per side. I would suggest to the applicants that you save a little time in case there is a need to explain something further. And I will remind the opposition, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people signed up to speak. You will also have 8 minutes. I don't know if you have a spokesperson, but if you are speaking individually, please be considerate of other people's time so that we have an opportunity to hear all voices. So we will start with the applicant, please.
Hey, this is Amanda. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Amanda.
Okay, great. If we could pull up.
I don't know what's happening, if we have lost the speaker or lost the presentation, but
Amanda, do we still have you on? Amanda? Amanda, your audio is a little weak.
Can you hear me now?
yes, yes, we can. Beth?
Sorry about that.
Beth,
Southwestern Wake County is going to some spectrum issues tonight.
Amanda, hold on 1 second. Okay, Beth, do we know what's happening with the presentation?
Let me check on that. It looks like they're taking it down and trying again. 1 second.
Excuse me, Amanda, we're having an issue with the presentation.
Okay.
Amanda, we're still having an issue with the presentation. Bear with us, please.
Sure thing. And I'm sorry too, Southwestern Wake County has been having some spectrum issues. I lost the engineer earlier as well. So I'm sorry about that.
I know the feeling.
And if I need to go without it, I'm prepared to do that as well.
All right, we're going to move forward without the presentation then. Amanda, if the timer is up, if you would like to begin.
Sure. So like I said, I've got the engineer and the developer here as well. Envision Homes is locally owned. They are working, as you saw, to construct 24 high-quality townhome units on a roughly less than 2-acre site. Bynum did a great job giving kind of the site overview. It's an assemblage of 4 parcels off of Wade Avenue. I think I'm now on slide 4, if you can get there. Yeah, like I said, high quality project. Next slide. As you can see here, this is sort of the site plan as per, can you go to the next slide? Sorry. It doesn't matter. So what you'll see if you can see the site plan here, you can see sort of the layout of the units. We do have variable buffers that we spread throughout the community, placing the widest of the buffers on the eastern side adjacent to one of the residential neighbors. You can also see how with the street components of the ordinance that we will be required to comply with, we are going to be putting in a deceleration lane into what will end up being by DOT a restricted right in, right out onto Wade Avenue. Next slide, please. I wanted to linger on the timeline a little bit. This case had some COVID implications, but we've been working on it and having communications for about a year. We did 3 noticed neighbor meetings here, 2 in June, and then the larger one in September. We also, given sort of some of the timing, we did present and speak with the CAC in this area as well. Can you go to the next slide, please? We were deferred a couple of times at planning agenda because of space considerations in their agenda, and one time we actually deferred ourselves to add conditions. Ultimately, we ended up with the 6-3 approval following our final presentation back in December. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we did offer a number of conditions. I would note that these have approximately doubled over the course of time, taking feedback from the neighbors. At the end of the day, at least 6 of them are designed to regulate the aesthetics of the townhome product, and 3 of them we placed in here specifically to address items raised by the neighbors based on the tenant type concerns. For example, we're restricting Greek living and things like that, rooftop terraces, if the concern were student renters. If you could go 2 slides ahead, please. So essentially of the almost 360 notices that we issued, can you go back 1? So of the total notices that we issued, we've had pretty consistently a handful of neighbors who have been speaking in opposition across time. We would note that our client has met with them multiple times. There were some discussions regarding off-site easements with respect to stormwater. Those have gone on up until last week. They ultimately did not come to fruition for a variety of reasons. As we know, we're going to contain over and above the ordinance norm to the 25-year-old storm. At the end of the day, we're reducing the number of driveways, and the restricted DOT benefit will be a net benefit to the traffic safety, and additional traffic is supposed to be minimal. Next slide, please. I'm going to focus on stormwater briefly. We had our engineer, I hope you can read this okay, pull some data as to what sort of change would happen if the use was constructed out as permitted by right versus what will happen if we go forward. As it stands now, the current zoning, the current lots were platted prior to the city stormwater requirements. So essentially nothing would be required from a stormwater perspective if this happened today. What we would be proposing to do with our conditions would result in an overall, negative change in the stormwater flow here, which is, we think pretty positive to this area generally. Next slide. Actually, you can go to the next slide because I just covered that. In addition to what I've already said, additional traffic here is supposed to be minimal. You can see this in your staff report. It's at the end of the day, 0.5% to existing traffic on Wade. We believe would have 11 peak AM trips and 15 peak PM trips. Again, the deceleration lane we think is going to be a significant benefit to the site. It's my understanding that hasn't happened on Wade Avenue in quite some time. If you could go to the next slide. Some neighbors did have some concerns about the potential for cut through the neighborhood. However, if you look at the aerial here, we think it makes a lot more sense to get back left to go right out, continue down Wade Avenue, and take essentially the Oberlin loop there that gives you controlled movement, free-flowing movement that's not these narrow neighborhood streets, and gets you back out left onto Wade. Next slide. At the end of the day, it's a mixed-use designation, but this really is new residential located adjacent to existing residential, and the permitted uses are restricting uses to residential. We believe the project has buffered about as much as it can based on its size, again, being less than 2 acres. We've doubled the conditions over time, trying to address some of the concerns of the neighbors. If you look through the staff report, it's one of the cleanest ones I've seen. We've got the map that will adjust accordingly, but everything else is pretty much overwhelmingly consistent. Last slide, please. Again, we met multiple times with folks. We heard a lot of the same things. We heard the tenant and occupancy comments from the neighbors. We still believe that the development policies in the staff report should be important here. I pulled a couple of quotes directly from the report. That the project is consistent with expanding housing choices. There's been a coexisting of different types of housing in this area for quite some time. The request is not a departure from that history or the broader development pattern of the area. As you all know, there are existing townhomes in the immediate vicinity. And again, we understand that it's not affordable, but it is a more affordable type of housing than what would be built by right under the existing zoning. So we do feel like that is contributing to the overall housing goals in the city. And as such, we would respectfully request your approval today.
Please note we have 53 seconds left. Should that be needed. We will now go to the opposition. Well, first off, let me ask, does anybody have any questions of the applicant? Councilmember Cox.
I'm interested in getting some more details about entrance and exit to Wade Avenue. I heard some mention of a deceleration lane. I was wondering if we could get some more information, more details about what that would look like.
Hey, could you unmute Andy Petty and let him speak to this issue?
Good evening, Andy Petty with Curry Engineering, 205 South Fuquay Avenue. Yeah, what we've got here right now is what we're looking at is a deceleration lane for right turn movements coming into the site. We believe that DOT will restrict the movements on Wade Avenue to right in and right out only, so that somebody's not trying to traverse, making a left turn out. So what we'll do is with our widening, we'll have to widen Wade Avenue as part of the City of Raleigh's thoroughfare plan. And we plan to take advantage of that extra pavement and go ahead and stripe a deceleration lane in there with a full storage and tapers appropriately sized for the speed on Wade Avenue. So we'll provide an actual turn lane for people to actually get off of Wade to make that turn movement, so it's not backing up traffic on the other 2 lanes that are out there in that direction of flow.
Is there a picture of this?
It's shown on the site plan in the presentation that Amanda gave, the site plan that shows up with the pink houses.
Okay. I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's if you look on that site plan, there's what we affectionately call a pork chop at the entrance. The lane that leads into that area is the actual turn lane itself.
Okay. Is there any way to get that picture up on the screen? Okay, can you orient me here?
Yes, sir. If you zoom into the townhomes that front Wade Avenue, if we zoom in right there on that and go to the pavement, the dark colored section that is with the text below Wade Avenue, you should be able to see we have an arrow that makes a right turn in there.
Yeah, I see it. It was just, the print is almost impossible to read. So Wade Avenue is at the top.
That's correct.
Okay, so so the entrances from the townhomes, those are simply going out to the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That's right. These would be rear loaded products. So all the driveways would face, we tried to orient the townhomes, so everything would face internal so that surrounding residents weren't looking at garages. They were looking at nice elevations. And then basically the back of the house is essentially what you have in that rear area.
Okay, so you got a little island there that prevents a left-hand turn and.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. I appreciate this.
Sure thing.
Okay, next we will hear from the opposition. We will start, I'm going to remind everybody you have 8 minutes total. There are 5 of you signed up to speak. Please be respectful of other people's time if each person is speaking. We're going to start with Adam Knock.
Thank you. My wife and I live at 2517 Winterberry Court. That's a small cul-de-sac right off of Gardner Street. I think my main concern is about the traffic coming out of here. I do believe that the Gardner Street, Banbury, and Canterbury will be basically the back alleyway for this complex. And that's a lot of traffic on narrow streets with street parking, no sidewalks, and then street parking. So there's definitely gonna be a concern for pedestrians. Also, this is a blind hill on Wade Avenue. When people are entering and leaving this complex, if you're at the stoplight at Canterbury, you will not be able to see if cars are coming or going. So that's dangerous both for the people on Wade and the people entering Wade from this complex. And also, there's definitely concern about the stormwater coming off of this property. We'll probably hear from the other residents who have adjacent properties, as well as there's a creek that runs through my property and runs along the Gardner Street Trail, and that is regularly flooded today after heavy rains, and I only think this is going to get worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Stevenson.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Stevenson of 1011 Gardner. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the neighbors. As I mentioned in our formal petition that we sent, we are not opposed to something being developed here. I understand that there's a need for more housing in Raleigh, and this particular piece of property in the surrounding neighborhood just cannot sustain the doubling of the current density that's allowed. You can see here that this property is specifically perched in the middle of a steep hill with a 70-foot elevation change. It's surrounded on 3 sides with residential homes. It presents challenges to the surrounding neighborhood on many fronts, including the need for ingress and egress on the already accident-prone steep hill of Wade and the obtrusiveness of the proposed increase in the allowed height of moving to RX3. My home's on the east side, and so we'll now be looking up 75 to 90 feet above our homes at these structures. So for scale, that's like putting a 6 to 7 story building behind us. Something at this height would also be seen from many of the surrounding streets within the neighborhood, towering above our homes. As we move to the next slide, I wanted to mention that we neighbors, as well as some of the planning commissioners, continually asked the developer, if we can move to the next slide, please, that would be great. We continually ask the developer to add some conditions to help alleviate the neighbor concerns, including some of those that I've outlined here. but they failed to add any meaningful conditions. The ones that they mentioned are insignificant in the eyes of the neighbors. They really haven't addressed the root of our concerns. They've been unwilling to compromise despite the strong neighbor opposition. And so we ask that if you're going to approve this, please consider the impact of the surrounding neighborhood and require these conditions to be added, leaving the density low, a mature tree buffer around the entire property, continuing the wall along the entire property. I'm not sure why it's just on 2 parcels, limiting the height to current residential height instead of adding the additional 10 feet, and adding sidewalks and speed bumps within the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kevin Hooper.
Hi, I live at 2605 Wade Avenue, the next driveway downhill from this proposed rezoning. I've lived here for almost 15 years and with my wife and my 2 young children. We welcome affordable and appropriately scaled multifamily options that are not excessive in density or height and that preserve green space and respect surrounding neighbors' privacy, including cottage courts. I do have slides. My first slide with pictures, please. The one with pictures, slide 2. This proposed site location is on the steepest blind hill on Wade. Pre-COVID traffic volume here is 34,000 vehicles a day, including a steady stream of large commercial trucks. Speeds in this 35-mile-an-hour zone routinely exceed 60. This is a diverse residential neighborhood and a walk zone to schools. It is not a city growth center or priority corridor per the comprehensive plan, and then there's an open city council action item for a special transportation study on Wade. Next slide, please. This block from Wade from Canterbury to Gardner averages more than 1 crash a month. RPD officers have told us that traffic enforcement on Wade is almost impossible because it is, quote, an officer safety issue. The State Patrol is also very aware of dangers on this stretch of Wade, especially the large commercial vehicles, which can't stop quickly. Because of the unique topography, this specific site is not a location to increase existing density 6-fold as proposed in the mixed-use zoning. It would be extremely dangerous to have many more vehicles specifically entering and exiting directly on the steep blind hill, even with the developers' brainstorm control measures. The developers consistently downplayed the need for unbiased safety input on this critical corridor. This needs to be studied and planned thoroughly before any rezoning and can't just be sorted out after the fact. It would be a dangerous, slippery slope, setting poor precedent all along Wade. We need to be more deliberative in action, and state DOT input is needed. For stormwater, current conditions offered in this rezoning are insufficient to protect downhill homes, given the impervious surface proposed on this steep grade. A 50-year storm mediation and drainage easement is necessary and should be conditioned. Can you skip to the last slide, please? We ask that this proposed RX3 rezoning as currently conditioned is unreasonable and should be denied. These are concrete actions that City Council can take to ensure that neighbors and residents are reasonably protected by adverse impacts and that any developer engages in good faith. We ask you, please help us. Thank you.
Next, we have Stephen Farah.
Yeah, hey, thanks for hearing me. I'm at 1010 Canterbury Road, right on the southwest side of this property. You know, I agree with my neighbors. I think traffic safety and privacy are major concerns for us all. You know, just to lay the landscape, on November 24th, this came up against the City Planning Council, and it got denied, and they asked for more conditions to be put in to appease the neighbors. And so they got sent back off to go, the developers, the applicants got sent off to go work on this. They came back on December 8th, and they didn't put any extra conditions in, but somehow it still got approved 6-3. So, you know, I think there needs to be more consideration on those. So, you know, I get that there's going to be development there. You know, that's part of the life of where we're at. You know, I think what we're asking for is something that's a compromise. You know, I think we should have 50-foot transitions with evergreen trees as a buffer, like my neighbor said. You know, they're asking for an RX zoning versus an R zoning, which just gives them an extra 10 feet of height. That's monstrous to us. So if you go to the next slide, you'll kind of get a perspective of what is it like for us neighbors. One, it's going to demolish all of the evergreens, all of the oaks on this property. We are going to have massive amount of people just staring in on ours. I got 2 kids. I'm worried about the privacy of all these people coming in here. At the cost that it is coming in, it's going to be a challenge. We're going to have, you know, university students and others coming in, and it's not a meaningful zoning. It doesn't fit in the future land map plan. And we're asking for a little bit of consideration before we move forward with this. It seems to me as the developer's just trying to maximize a profit of $12 million plus in revenue for this project in a massive increase in volume and scale. So, I just ask the council to please help us to work on some additional conditions here to make it worthwhile. Would prefer it to be declined outright, though.
You have 1 minute left for the last speaker, Chanel Vicini. Is Chanel
Hear me?
on?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. If we could open my presentation and start on slide 5, please. So I'm Chanel Vicini, and I live on Gardner Street, and I've actually been an appointed neighborhood speaker through all of these meetings, including the neighborhood meetings. And I just want to make a note that I've never been asked to meet with the developer or their legal team for myself, my family, or on behalf of any of the neighbors. As my neighbors mentioned, there's about a 70-foot elevation change on this one block of Wade Avenue. Because it is so dangerous, the developer expects there to be a left turn barrier as well as a slow down lane. However, what this doesn't take into account is that drivers that are returning to the development from the eastward direction have no way to turn into this development. The developer said that the Oberlin Loop is an easy way, but that only accounts for people that want to go west. It doesn't account for anyone that's coming east that needs to turn in here. They have to cut through the neighborhood. There is absolutely no other way. Your staff predicts 242 additional trips pulling onto Wade Avenue on this blind hill, and most of those are going to cut through the neighborhood if they're coming from downtown. There's no way to turn left into this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant, you have 53 seconds left. Is there anything you would like to address?
Unless there are further questions, I think we're good.
Okay, I am going to then close the hearing. Does anybody on council have any additional questions? Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a bit of a tangential question, but I am interested as a relatively new councilor about the long-range plan for Wade Avenue. I think Mr. Hooper touched on this, and we know continued development along Wade and also the tributary roads coming into Wade Avenue. We know how heavily used of a road that is coming in and out of the western part of our community and county. And I know it's a DOT maintained managed road, but I would like for staff to follow with me to let me know what is the plans for Wade Avenue long term. Thank you.
Clerk. Gail, you're muted. Get the mug out.
We did get a number of letters that have been written comments that have been forwarded to you on this case. Just wanted that to be a part of the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Fort.
Yes, ma'am. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 2nd, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future use land map and to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Melton. Going to ask for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Clerk, that was 7-1 with Councilor Cox opposed. Councilor Branch.
Yes, I was wondering if staff can reach out to the neighbors. I know Ms. Jennifer Stevenson mentioned sidewalks. We have a plan for sidewalks as well as speed humps. If transportation can reach out with them to work through those, I think it will be a great asset. And those plans are at no cost to the residents, so I think that's an added benefit.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Branch. Good suggestion. Okay, next we have rezoning Z4020, 1912 Hillsborough Street. We have no one signed up in opposition for this case. We'll hear from Bynum.
This is a request to rezone 0.4 acres from CX5 with conditions and that special residential parking overlay to CX7 with conditions, and again, the same overlay. This was, here we are at the recommended public hearing. The Planning Commission did recommend approval. This is located immediately adjacent to west of the Players Retreat and on the east side of the Hillsborough Pullman traffic circle. They have prohibited a number of uses, limited the total floor area gross for personal service, restaurant, and retail use, specified building materials and prohibited building materials. They have limited the number of bedrooms in each dwelling unit. And then they have made some specifications about building at the ground level and some screening along the roundabout frontage. They've limited the maximum building height to 90 feet, and they have also specified the removal of an existing brick wall and specified screening for parking garage. And then they have also provided some standards, some self-imposed regulation around blank wall standards. So what's happening here? The residential density is increasing. The allowed number of hotel rooms or potential number of hotel rooms is increasing. The setbacks are not changing. The max office building square footage is going up, as is the total max building square footage. This is consistent with the neighborhood mixed use designation on the future land use map, consistent with the plan overall. A couple of inconsistent policies here around Gateway Corridor and important intersections that are consistent, and then inconsistent that there's just a couple of policies here that are inconsistent related to frontage, particularly. The frontage for this site is complex. It's basically a round site on its western side, and then it's also inconsistent with the urban design guidelines policy. And if this is approved, it does require, I misspoke earlier when I said this was consistent with future land use map. This is inconsistent with future land use map and would require an amendment to the map if the zoning is approved. And again, the Planning Commission does recommend approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Councilmember Cox.
Is there a small area plan for this area?
Yes, there is.
How did this stack up against the small area plan?
So I would need to look at the staff report. This is governed by the Hillsborough Street Small Area Plan, the Cameron Village Hillsborough Street Small Area Plan. I'd be happy to look that up for you while you hear from the applicant.
Yes, if you could, because I think that'll be important.
Okay, there's no one here to speak in opposition. We had actually allowed additional conditions to be put in, and so now, before I open the hearing, I want to ask if there's any questions other than Mr. Cox's. There is no one here speaking in opposition. I'm going to ask Councilor Fort if she is prepared to make a motion.
I am.
So I'm going to ask, I guess Molly Stewart is here to speak in support. Molly, I'm ready to open and close the hearing, if that's okay with you.
And that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, clerk?
We did receive a written comment of opposition to this case that's been forwarded to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm opening the hearing and closing the hearing. Do we have an answer for Councillor Cox on his question?
I was just looking at the area plan here, there's no height guidance included in the area plan for this particular case, for this particular site. I think largely because this was rezoned almost concurrent with the area plan. So the last rezoning here was in 2014. And I think it was probably not, as I recall, not included on the zoning height guidance map for the area plan because it had been so recently rezoned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fort, do you have a motion?
Yes, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 2nd, 2021, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Do you have a second? Councilmember Stewart, his second. All in favor, please raise your hands. Clerk, that was unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have Z4120, ACC Boulevard.
This is a request to rezone just under 6 acres from PD to R10 with conditions. It's a combination of PD and R10 with conditions to a unified R10 with conditions district. The request is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission recommended approval. You'll remember that we opened the hearing on January 5th. We heard from the public at that time. I did not present the case, and the applicant did not make a presentation at that time either. Be happy to make a short presentation this evening if that's helpful to you. And there is a little bit of time left on the clock for opposition comments.
Anyone from council? I can't see everybody. Does anyone from council have a question of Bynum? And that's first question. Second, would you like to hear a presentation? Okay, I have one person who actually indicated A. So, Bynum, what I'll say is let's make it brief presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Of course. This site is located on the north side of ACC Boulevard. We're just outside 540 on the north side of Glenwood Avenue, Highway 70. A couple of views of the site from the street. There is a condition here around the eastern property boundary for a planted buffer. The change here is actually a reduction in residential density and office and retail square footage, as well as the maximum number of units. The request is consistent with the future land use map, consistent with the plan overall. The reduction in housing makes it inconsistent with the zoning for housing policy, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you deliberate among yourselves?
Could you take down the, okay, thank you. Council Member Stewart and then Council Member Branch.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Walter, I'm curious if the Planning Commission discussed at all that part of this property is in the floodplain?
I can't speak to that specifically. I would note that the buffering condition acknowledges that there is new riparian buffer and tree conservation on the site already. So the applicant is aware of that. We also have stormwater staff here to answer if you have more particular questions about the disposition of the land.
Do you have a follow-up, Councilor Stewart?
No, I mean, just a quick follow-up point that I find it quite interesting that We spent a lot of time hearing from Planning Commission and their interest in keeping development out of the floodplain on a big case in December, but now we're seeing a couple cases slip through where we're allowing development in the floodplain. So more just a point to be made.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Branch.
Yeah, and just wanted to point out that it looks as if they are reducing the number of allowed units in the zoning case. Is that what I saw and have been reading correctly?
This is a down zoning. Yes, sir. They're reducing the allowed development.
Okay,
so
thank
the
you.
portion of the property was formerly part of a PD that envisioned mixed use, and they're rezoning to create a unified district that would allow residential development exclusively.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Knight.
I know there's some traffic issues raised last time. Have those been dealt with? And I know staff responded to those at our meeting. Have those been dealt with?
I'd be happy for Jason Myers from Transportation Planning to speak to you about that.
Thank you.
And Jason Myers in Transportation. A couple of, and I'm going off of emails that I've seen that I think were sent to council or at least staff. It is in the street plan to have ACC Boulevard as a three-lane avenue parallel parking, which is basically a two-lane street with a center turn lane, bike lanes, and on-street parking. And that should fit, or at least come very close to fitting in that. And staff has been planning for quite a long time to implement that with resurfacing whenever the street condition leads us to that. We've been working more recently on trying to get some of that done more quickly beforehand, and are developing a project to do that at a low cost, and are planning on reaching out to citizens around there about how we should accomplish that. So that's in the works. It is not something that can be completed in the next couple of weeks. There is an NCDOT project to install a signal at the Courtney Estates. It's the entrance to the Walmart. I may have the street name wrong. In that section of ACC Boulevard. And so given NCDOT maintenance and that project, we're trying to coordinate with them on those issues. More recently, 35-mile-an-hour speed limit signs and curve warning signs, I believe, went up between the last meeting and this meeting, though I have not personally verified that is complete. I know it was ordered of our operations staff. Does that answer council's questions?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions? Clerk?
Again, we received written comments on this case that have been forwarded to you. That's for the record.
Okay, thank you. We have closed the hearing in this case, I believe, or no, we left it open for additional, well, no one here is here to speak against. So I know there's time left on the clock for that, but no one here to fill that. Councilmember Stewart?
Correct. I was just going to add that we have not heard from the applicant on this, and I know that she has some information at least on floodplain issues.
Okay, we'll hear from Isabel Maddox.
Thank you, and good evening to you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Isabel Maddox here on behalf of Blue Hill Development, the prospective developer here, and also on the line are Julie Gavigan and Whit Cozart of Blue Hill, and Jonathan Allen of NV5, our civil engineer. Thanks to Bynum for summarizing the case. We are downzoning this to an extent because a portion of this property is in a PD, which requires a minimum of 15 units to the acre. And because of various topographical, stormwater, floodplain, and a big utility easement across the front, that density cannot be achieved. I won't go into a lot of detail because I think you've heard most of the high points, but I do want to speak to floodplain. I have been in contact with Councilor Stewart on this, and I will just in Planning Commission's defense, this case went to Planning Commission in November, really before the floodplain text change had been published. And so that was not even out because of various delays by our team. you're just seeing this case now, but it was not, the floodplain text change really had not come out at that point. But we have talked to Councilor Stewart, and she's asked for a floodplain condition. We've agreed to the following condition, and I'll read it. The 100-year floodplain shall remain undisturbed from added fill except for the installation of utilities, stormwater conveyance, greenway trails, fencing, or other public improvements. I've talked with her as recently as this afternoon. I believe she's happy with this language. So if you have any other questions, I'm certainly available to answer those, as are the other members of our team. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart, is that accurate?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Let's see, this is District E. Are you, I'm getting ready to close the hearing, provided that Councilmember Knight is ready to make a motion. Oh, no, we have to close it and then hold it so the condition can be inserted. Got it. All right, I'm closing the hearing. Please submit the condition, and we will take this up at our next meeting as a special item. Okay, thank you. Next, we have rezoning Z4520 Buffalo and New Hope.
My tall colleague was here before me. This is a request to rezone just under 16 acres from neighborhood mixed use 3-story height limit with conditions to residential mixed use 4-story height limit with a parking limited frontage and conditions. The request is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall, and the Planning Commission recommends denial by a split vote. This is located at the southeast corner of New Hope and Buffalo Road. If you are having a sense of deja vu, this was rezoned pretty recently, at least in my memory. You can see largely surrounded by residential, and there is commercial designation at the site north of this one. View of the site, this is looking north on New Hope. They have prohibited a couple of uses, limited the maximum number of dwelling units. They have specified 75-foot setback from the eastern and southern property boundaries, as well as provided for a fence with a minimum height of 6 feet in that same area. The residential density, currently residential is prohibited here, which is really a big motivation for the rezoning case. So the density goes up to 22 units per acre, and the maximum units, as I mentioned before, is 350. The setbacks on the eastern boundary are decreasing, and on the southern boundary, increasing. So the existing zoning conditions are pretty extensive about the details of buffer and transition to the east and south. And this case is taking a more simplified approach. And you can see that proposed 75-foot setback in this diagram. This request is consistent with the neighborhood mixed use designation on the future land use map, also consistent with the urban form map, and consistent with the plan overall. The buffering requirements and building height per the Buffalo New Hope area plan are both inconsistent. Again, the Planning Commission recommends denial largely because of inconsistency with the area plan guidance and also guidance related to buffering requirements. And the opposed votes cited consistency, those opposed to the denial cited consistency with the future land use map and overall comprehensive plan. What questions could I answer for you before you open the hearing to hear from the applicant and the public?
Do we have any questions of Bynum? Okay, I am going to open the hearing. First, I would like to note that we do have 6 people registered to speak in opposition. And we have we will hear from the applicant first. So is Molly Stewart on the line?
I'm here, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Molly.
Good evening, councilors. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group. I am here with Andrew Howe of Alliance Realty Partners, our applicant, as well as Bray Harrell from McAdams Engineering and Reinald Stevenson and Chase Smith from Ramey Kemp. These are our traffic engineers. As you see on your screen, this site represents an opportunity for 350 households to be located in a convenient location in an already urbanized area near parks. Those are represented by trees on your screen, near the Neuse River Greenway, schools, walkable to a bus line, and the amenities and employment available along the Capitol Boulevard corridor. Next slide. There's a need for multifamily rental housing in the city as a whole, and especially in this location. None exists within 0.7 miles of the site, and those within 2 miles of the site are clustered in a single direction. Moreover, the average age of these rental communities is 36 years. It's well into their useful life, and none are less than 92% occupied. This demonstrates a need for this type of housing at this location. I'd like to skip the next slide and go to the aerial. Perfect. Since the small area plan was adopted, the new Lidl grocery store is now open on that northern parcel, as you can see in this aerial view. Next slide. Our request to the council this evening and our hope is that once the public hearing has been closed, the applicant will be permitted additional time to submit new zoning conditions to address certain concerns that we've heard from the neighbors. And I'll jump into those conditions on the following slides. Next slide. I'd like to address the top neighbor concerns that we've heard regarding the proposed zoning. With the limited time that we have for this presentation, I'll be skimming the surface a little bit on these issues, but our team welcomes a more in-depth conversation on any or all of these topics, should the council so desire. Next slide. So traffic is the #1 concern we've heard on this site, and there are actually several ways in which the proposed project can improve the existing situation. And I'll just note here that this site is already entitled for 71,000 square feet of retail use, making those zoning phase trip generation numbers very similar in the existing and proposed conditions. Next slide. Property buffers were the next most discussed topic. And I realize it's hard to read this slide. I do have each of these images in its own separate slide in case we want to dive in on these in discussion, but this is for comparison. The small area plan, as Bynum mentioned, does indicate that neighborhood transitions should exceed those required per the UDO in this location. And that's the case both in the existing and the proposed conditions. In the case of the existing zoning, that required building setback on the east side is more than 3.5 times that required under a standard neighborhood transition. And this is a rather extreme level of buffering. And that's something that was decided at a time when a Walmart was the proposed use for this site. It was part of a larger shopping center with the attendant loading dock, the truck deliveries, and the frequent trash pickups that entails. So certainly an extensive buffer would be needed to screen that truck traffic from the neighboring residences. The proposed buffer is also greater than required under the UDO, but more in keeping with the transition between different types of residential uses. Our additional zoning conditions to be submitted would require the tree conservation area that is required under the UDO be located in the conditions shown in blue on your screen there, to the extent those areas meet the UDO requirements for tree conservation. Next slide. With respect to parking lot lighting, another concern that we've heard, the UDO provides some stringent protections for neighbors with respect to parking lot lighting, particularly along the boundaries of an R district. And that's what we have along both our eastern and southern boundaries. And so you see in these images, within 50 feet of that property line, the lights cannot be more than 15 feet tall. All the fixtures in the parking lot must be full cutoff. And at that R district property boundary, you can't have more than a half-foot candle of light shedding at that location. And we actually couldn't find an image of how little light that is. That is, I think, really designed to be something very, very close to zero. It's a very, very small amount of light. And layered on top of these existing protections are proposed requirements for fencing and tree conservation areas along all the boundaries, resulting in a very high level of protection for the surrounding properties. Next slide. The RX4 district permits 68 feet of height, and we are proposing a maximum of 59 feet of height. That is 9 feet higher than would be permitted in a 3-story zoning. And there are a couple of key reasons why this is actually even lower than it sounds. First, this number represents an absolute maximum. As you're aware, as a zoning condition, no variance is permitted to this height. This is the cap. And given our early stages of design and site exploration, it's just not possible to say exactly what that measured height will be. So this is not actually the intended height. This is the intended height plus a cushion that the designers are comfortable with to get through that design process. Next slide. And secondly, what you're looking at here on your screen, those pink areas, those are areas that we think in the grading, the ultimate grading of the site to level it out for development. Those would be areas of cut, and the dark pink areas would be actually 3 to 7 feet lower than current elevations on the site, with the light pink areas being something less than 3 feet, but still areas of cut. So those areas would come down in elevation. So just to highlight that. And that area in the southwest corner, that's actually a little bit different. Based on the way the water flows on the site, that's actually a likely location for a detention pond. Which brings us to the next slide. Stormwater has changed the most since these slides were submitted by the deadline. So I can say that first point remains true. Those are sort of the standard UDO requirements that apply under the existing and proposed zoning. But we are able to actually offer a condition now to greatly increase the protections on this site by also being able to detain the 25 and 100-year storms on our site. So this is a much greater level of protection for the neighbors than exists under the current zoning. Next slide. I'd actually like to skip that next slide and move on. So on your screen is one of the currently applicable zoning conditions, and this condition requires that a grocery store be provided and one large enough to support a pharmacy. Since this, I don't know what that was. Since the zoning was put in place in 2015, neither the original applicant nor anyone else has been able to develop under this zoning, and now we've got the Lidl open across the street, so this zoning is simply unworkable. Next slide. And to conclude, this proposal is about housing. As we know, housing is badly needed in the city, and this applicant proposes to provide 350 new units. Alliance is in the business of providing attainable housing, which is affordable to those earning 80 to 100% of area median income. This group represents working people who are being pushed out of Raleigh every day. They're neither served by most new market rate housing built in the city, nor by most sort of capital A affordable housing. This proposal is for market rate housing for these working people, and the project would not require public subsidy, and the cost savings are driven by the efficiency of scale needed for the private market to provide housing in our region's largest city for this forgotten group, who will otherwise struggle or fail to find quality housing they can afford in our city. Unfortunately, those future households can't yet be identified nor speak for themselves in this forum. We've worked very hard to address the concerns of our existing neighbors, and we're requesting the chance to serve those future neighbors as well. And myself and our team were available for questions and further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions now, or we just want to go through the opposition first? Okay. We will next hear then from the opposition. We will start with Aaron Quist. And I'm going to remind everybody, I believe, Beth, we have 6 people signed up, but 2 people may not have shown up. Is that accurate?
Correct, Mayor.
Okay. So it is 8 minutes total. I just want to remind the 4 people who are here to speak to please allocate or leave time for those behind you. Was Aaron Quist here, Beth?
He is. I think she's deferred to start with Lillian, if that works for you.
Lillian Thompson. Okay, we'll start with Lillian.
My name is Lillian Thompson, and I live in a townhome at Top of the Pines for Northeast Raleigh. I, along with 215 opposition petitioners, are here to defend the existing zoning, which is 100% with our small area plan, comprehensive plan, the future land use map, and our city's vision to pursue world-class quality of life by actively collaborating with our community. Next slide. This equilateral triangle illustrates my declaration that we are 3 equal collaborators and are aligned with the all-seeing eye of the city's vision as a win-win. Next slide. Our present zoning already has great features for neighborhood mixed-use retail and could work as an RX or residential mixed use with retail at ground level and housing above. I point out that this present rezoning request is not RX residential mixed use. The key features from this 2015 Walmart conceptual site plan shows tree conservation, tree-lined sidewalks with a bike lane, safety, walkability, 160-foot berm of trees and buffers from the neighbors next door. The next slide, please. Next slide. Challenges of this rezoning request. Our small area plan values are stated here and is what our community holds dear. You're one slide in front. One slide back, please. One slide back. Okay, the interests and challenges of all three parties involved in this equilateral triangle is that our small area plan already states here what our community holds dear. The interest of applicants' rezoning request is a private property, high density apartment complex, 4 stories high, 350 unit, 500 plus parking, represents an urban pig in lipstick dying to fit in a low-density suburban community disguised as friendly housing that needs a place to live. It adds 0 value within a 1 mile circumference, much less 75 feet from our property line, separated only by a 6-foot high fence around a 60-foot high building close to surrounding neighbors. City Council must decide supplying housing for a growing city versus ensuring quality of life for our communities versus via our city's vision. In conclusion, next slide. Specific to this corner, we believe our small area plan has legal precedent over applying an overall city guides to defend being consistent. The site is purely an investor hit and run deal, ignoring parameters of our small area plan. 2021, will we win or lose? Win, lose, or deny, or make it fit regardless. Next slide, Angela Stahl. Angela Stahl has come on the line.
So that was Lillian Thompson speaking. We next have Angela Stahl. Is she with us, Beth?
Yes, I am. Hello. I'm Angela Stahl, and I live at 4424 Gallatry Lane, a half a mile from this intersection. The intersection of Buffalo and New Hope Roads is ranked as the 3rd most dangerous in Wake County and 23rd in our state, according to DOT's 2019 report. They report over 300 crashes in the last 5 years for this corridor, seen in just a half a mile in each direction. Next slide, please. DOT also shows 15,000 daily trips for New Hope Road and 28,000 for Buffalo Road. These figures were prior to the completion of 4 townhome projects with over 500 units that City Council has approved, and some are pending construction along Buffalo Road. All of them center on Lidl as the closest grocery store, which is across the street. Next slide, please. Buffalo Road is primarily a 2-lane road, except for the brief 1 mile section in this dangerous intersection. While there are plans for road improvements to widen Buffalo and extend Spring Forest and Perry Creek roads, there are no funds in the 10-year corridor plan for this area. This crash data here shows how dangerous this intersection is with current zoning. Adding this density of 350 apartments will bring a 50% increase in anticipated daily trips above current zoning expectations and will only make this overwhelmed intersection a nightmare. Next slide. Joe Johnson will be speaking.
So next we have Joe Johnson. We have 3 minutes left. Mr. Johnson, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor. My name is Joe Johnson, 4105 South Hall Road in Raleigh. There are over 8,000 rental units concentrated in the 27604 and 27616 zip codes in Raleigh. These are 2 of the most concentrated zip codes for rentals probably in the city. The Planning Commission made a point of saying that it was oversaturated with rental properties, and they got it right when they denied this application 5-2. what I'd like to show you right now is on the screen, the proposed site, and half of that is open land, half of it is tree cover. Top of the Pines is to the right of that on the screen there. But really what I want to share with you is there are several new apartments that I'll get into in a second. The level at 401 on 401 Highway in Spring Forest, there are 3 buildings, that's 300 units. But what I want to show you is the tree cover that's surrounding that on the north side and adjacent to the residential community. And secondly, the Sterling, which is over near Triangle Town Center, that is about 300, let's see, the Sterling is 339 units and on about 14 acres of land. And you see all the tree cover around that, the buffering around that. Now, what you don't see is the target in the upper right-hand corner, which is Triangle Town Center. And then the property to the, on the bottom there is going to be, you've got the Piedmont, which is another huge 4-story building. What, if we look at the market data for older apartments, Ms. Stewart made the point that there are old antiquated apartments that are just not working for anybody. Well, I would differ with that. Market data shows the older apartments built in the 80s and 90s along New Hope have all been upgraded and present excellent housing and affordable rates for tenants in the 2006-04 and 27-16 zip codes. Market data also shows there are 1,358 new units coming out of the ground in 2021 and 22. I did an extensive amount of research with the development portal, Raleigh Development Portal, and the Wake County Tax Office to accumulate a lot of data, and that's for the Northeast. Market data also shows 1,953 rental units built between 2002 and 2020. The one in 2002 is the garden over at Winslow Park on 401 and Fox Road, 262 units. The newest one built is the Villages at Raleigh Beach. And that's the Villages at Raleigh Beach, 392 units, 3 stories, 17 buildings. Now, the big common denominator is we're looking at a lot of properties that are in the 12, 13, 14 acre range, which is what the subject property is, with 300, 400 units.
Mr. Johnson, your time is up.
Thank you.
We have gone to our 8 minutes. Thank you for being with us. Do we have any questions from City Council? Council Member Stewart, then Council Member Branch. My understanding is the applicant has asked that we close the hearing so they can add additional conditions. Is that correct? Was that mentioned?
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Council Member Stewart, then Councilor Branch.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I'm interested in asking Ms. Stewart, one of the things I've heard from neighbors and looked at the small area plan a bunch, and what I keep seeing is that folks wanted commercial in this area. And so I'm curious what y'all and the team are thinking in terms of getting some sort of small scale commercial that would work well with what you've got proposed, as well as the Vital across the street, so that it's complementary.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a great question. I know that we've thought a lot about this possibility. Certainly, it would be a fantastic tenant amenity for sure. And I think this comes down to the survival of those businesses. So I'd actually like to turn it over to Andrew Howe with Alliance Realty, who can say more about that situation. Has Andrew been unmuted?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yep, thank you, Molly. So Councilmember Stewart, just to kind of address your specific question, in the past, and like Molly said, we've certainly analyzed this. Where we've seen it and where we've kind of been able to use it is in the amenity space or clubhouse leasing and amenity area, where we could kind of retrofit and add in some sort of retail, commercial, as you mentioned. Where we kind of are, and based on kind of what we've seen and just kind of studying the area, it's going to be extremely difficult just with this current COVID environment that we live in. And as Molly kind of alluded to, just the survival of the business itself. Where we're seeing right now from a retail and commercial perspective, those individuals and business owners are gravitating more towards urban centers that you're going to find along kind of Capitol Boulevard, Midtown East, North Hills, downtown Raleigh, where they're going to have a lot of foot traffic, right? From, again, those urban centers. So, for us, it's something we're certainly kind of open and willing to look into, but just, again, from the feasibility of success for the businesses, it's going to be very difficult to kind of play when you're not in more of a urban setting, I should say.
And I'll just add to that, the Lidl across the street is also not it's kind of a mixed use site, but together, I think we've got our district.
Okay, Councilmember Branch.
Yes, my question is kind of more for staff. I wanted the presentations to go first. It's about traffic. They mentioned that this is the third worst intersection in Raleigh, 23rd in the state. Can staff kind of speak to those numbers and the plan there?
Yes, Jason Myers with Transportation. What those numbers are, and I'm going to do my best to speak about something that's very much an engineering matter and not being an engineer, is that the state has a program called the Highway Safety Improvement Program where they systematically look at crash patterns statewide every year, and there's a number of different ways that they identify locations that, as their materials say, are possibly deficient, and then spend engineering resources, both the state and when it's in the city of Raleigh, some of our colleagues in the Department of Transportation also look at these things and try to find out what could be done. In some cases, just the given variability, you'll see a street or a location pop up on the HSIP in one year and then not the next year, and then not the next year, and then not the next year, because there isn't really a systematic way that is a different location. So it's kind of a statistical analysis of sorts to trigger an engineering analysis. I don't know what the results of NCDOT's engineering analysis may have been. I don't know that they've conducted it yet. And if there's a desire for some detailed information from the Department of Transportation and the city's traffic engineering, we can certainly bring that to City Council. But what that means is that at the 1 year that it popped up on the list, it had the third highest ranking in that statistical analysis. It is not necessarily saying that it is the most dangerous. It's just that 1 year's look at what the potential patterns were. Does that answer Councilmember Branch's question?
It does. Thank you. And I'll probably talk more to you all about overall traffic later.
Councilmember Cox.
Yes, I waited until others had a chance to make some comments. So I have several. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Transportation Department because they did provide us a report about accidents in this area over the past 5 years. And I think the statistics tell a lot. The report has two sections. For North New Hope, over the past 5 years, there have been 301 crashes, resulting in 3 fatalities, 163 injuries, and nearly $2 million in property damage. And on Buffalo Road, there have been 172 crashes, resulting in 1 fatality, 95 injuries, and nearly $1.2 million in property damage. So altogether, that's 473 crashes, 4 fatalities, 258 injuries, and a little more than $3 million in property damage. And as already been noted, it is one of the most dangerous intersections in Wake County. Now, the residents from this area of North New Hope and Buffalo Road have expressed their disagreement with this rezoning and have asked that we not approve it. Many of these residents have lived in this area for many years, while others are relatively new. None that I'm aware of supports this rezoning. The residents of this area have been very involved with their community. Just 5 years ago, they worked hard and diligently to create a small area plan to guide development at this location. In addition, the current zoning was also established just 5 years ago with buffers and protections that were the result of successful good faith negotiations. The residents trusted their government and worked in good faith with city staff, city council, developers, and landowners to develop a plan and zoning that will provide for responsible growth and development. After many months of hard work, the council agreed unanimously with the outcome of that hard work. The residents find, as I think anyone would, that the proposed rezoning is inconsistent with the small area plan. The proposed heights are too tall. A key policy of the small area plan sets a maximum of 3 stories, not 4, and 50 feet in height. The proposed rezoning requests 4 stories and 59 feet, which is 20% over the maximum specified in the small area plan. The current zoning provides transition areas that include an earthen berm, solid concrete walls, and heavy vegetation. The proposed rezoning removes those neighborhood protections, eliminates the berm, the concrete walls, most of the vegetation, and reduces the size of the transition area and provides instead a small wooden fence. Instead of an adequate transition, they will have a parking lot facing their homes. These residents in good faith work with the city staff and council on a plan for good development that benefits both landowner and the community. Now an out-of-state developer is asking that we overturn all of that in order for them to maximize their profits. We would all like to see a compromise. Unfortunately, the residents and the developer are far apart on this rezoning case. While some concessions have been made, those concessions do not equate to a compromise. Compromise means choices that all parties are willing to live with. However, in this case, the gap is great. The developer has asked us to close the hearing and so they can add a few more concessions and allow us to make a choice. They have essentially signaled that negotiations are done. The concessions they want to make before we vote are clear. The compromise is far away. I find the proposed rezoning to be inconsistent with the small area plan and is not in the best interest of the public. I am particularly concerned about high density, car-dependent growth at one of the most dangerous intersections in Raleigh and in Wake County. The developer admitted just moments ago, this is not an urban area. It won't support, they claim because it's not an urban area, they're hesitant to provide additional retail. And that's the point that I've been making all along. This is not an urban area. This is a low density suburban area. The proposed rezoning and proposed project promotes sprawl actually, because it will just result in 350 additional units that are car dependent. We want to encourage development on our transit corridors and in our growth areas, not sprawl in our, like this, in our suburban areas. Given the history of this area, the hard work and good faith of the citizens that live here, the vision that these citizens have for the future of this area, and past agreements with the city and council on that vision, I cannot support this rezoning as is, and I hope that the developer will seriously add conditions that will lead to compromise in the time that we have after we close this hearing. So that's all I have on this for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if the applicant had any response to some of the issues that were brought up.
Certainly. This is Molly Stewart. Particularly with respect to traffic, just a few responses there. Obviously, as a zoning matter, trip generation isn't dramatically different from existing entitlements. But beyond that, as a common starting place, we can also say that, you know, among all intersection types, certainly the intersection of 2 major roads is going to be on the higher end of where crashes happen. And I understand we do have Ryan Stevenson, our traffic engineer, on the line if we need to hear more. I understand the types of crashes that happen in those locations involve a lot of rear end collisions at the stoplight, as well as crashes that are caused by unprotected left turns. I am a bit surprised that there's an association being made between the proposed housing and the relative danger of the intersection. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I am a planner. And obviously, any sort of general principle would need to be looked at in the context of a particular intersection. But in general, the general principle is that increased population density is associated with better crash outcomes in both numbers and severity than lower population density is. So at the very least, I think it's far from a foregone conclusion that this proposal would worsen crashes at this location. I think that is a leap to say that. In any event, the data on this intersection doesn't yet reflect the changes resulting from the opening of the Lidl, which said increased density and traffic there may have actually improved the crash data. But also there were some improvements made in connection with that development. And I understand, that opened in late 2019. It's not yet reflected in the data sets. And I know that if you're interested, I know that Reinhold Stevenson, the traffic engineer, has more background on that and how NCDOT is looking at that. But I just wanted to let you know those few points. Thank you.
Perhaps Molly could send that information to us.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I am now going to close the hearing. We will wait to see what the applicant returns with. One thing I wanted to ask, and I think I heard this, the apartments would be focused on 80 to 100% AMI. Did I hear that correctly?
That is absolutely the goal for this site. And so similar to, this is the developer's second project in Raleigh, and the first was in the Capitol Plaza Hotel location. A similar goal happened on that site, and I can see that site is farther along. There's a lot of risk in this process, given that it's fully private and you have to get through the site plan process. But I can say that one has successfully, they're getting closer with that one, and it is still achieving those targets. In fact, really at the 80% end of that as far as the rents that are contemplated. And they're very excited about that business model. This site is contemplated for that same model.
Do we have an idea on the range of rents?
I would have to ask Andrew how to respond to that.
Is Andrew still with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Molly. So Mayor Baldwin, to answer your question, again, we would target kind of a very similar business model here where we're targeting around 80 to 100% AMI. So we would be looking at 1 and 2 bedrooms, in which would be targeting around kind of the 900 to 1,000 on the 1 bedrooms per month, and we'd be right in the 12 to 1,300 a month rent on the 2 bedrooms.
Okay, thank you. Did I see the clerk with her hand raised? You're muted, Gail.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. For the record, we did receive several written comments in opposition to this case that have been forwarded to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will, as the case is closed, we'll wait to hear from the applicant on additional conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will address an issue that has been on the docket for 5 years or longer. Short-term rentals, TC 820. We have 6 people signed up, I believe, Beth, to speak in support and 2 to speak in opposition. Is that correct?
Mayor, no, we have 1 in opposition and 3 are on the call in support.
Okay. All right. Why don't you call on the 3 people, or the first, I don't know who is not on there. You could tell me who is.
Yep. We are going to go with Mike, then Drew, then Rob.
Mike, Drew, and Rob.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
All right. We, Councilor Stewart.
Do we have a staff presentation?
We may. I think I know this like the back of my hand, so I left it up to head. After 5 years, yeah, that's kind of what happens. We will start with the staff presentation. Thank you, Councilor Stewart. In brief, please.
Thank you. Justin Hermeta, Planning and Development. I'll be brief with the presentation for TC 820 short-term rentals. This is a UDO text amendment that, in short, will replace existing homestay regulations with those for short-term rentals. So the current homestay regulations were adopted in 2019. They allow a maximum of 2 guest rooms to be used with up to 2 adults and their children for 30 days. They do not allow for whole house rentals. The homestays must be occupied by a domiciled resident, and they require use standards such as mailed notice at the time of application and limitations on cooking facilities and bedrooms. The proposed ordinance adopts a definition of short-term rental. You'll see it on the screen there. It does allow for either partial or whole house rental, including the rental of an accessory structure. Other use standards include the carryover of the prohibition on cooking facilities and bedrooms and exterior signage. They do not allow special events in residential zoning districts. They require the renewal of an annual zoning permit, and they do allow up to 25% or 2 units to be used for short-term rentals in multifamily buildings. Finally, they do require the posting of the zoning permit number on the property itself and on all advertisements for the rental, and it does provide for penalties and potential revocations of permits for certain violations. Planning Commission did review this text change on January 12th and recommended approval 6-3 on an alternate version that did include categories of hosted and unhosted rentals and placed limitations on the number of days that unhosted rentals could be available for rent. And that's all I have.
Do we have any questions of staff? Okay, seeing no hands, we will then hear from those who have signed up to speak. I'm going to ask everybody to keep their comments to 2 minutes each. We will start with Michael Lodeboli.
Lodeboli, thank you.
Lodeboli, thank you, Michael.
Well, I appreciate the effort. My name is Mike Lodeboli. I reside at 3320 Ruffin Street. I respectfully encourage council to support the language in TC 8-20. I'd like to thank the council for supporting small businesses, short-term rentals, and for keeping your promise to the many short-term rental hosts who voted this new progressive council in. Again, thank you, and I encourage you to support this text change.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we have Drew Kirschner.
Dyke Avenue. I was originally signed up to speak against your recommendations until reading this revised ordinance, and am in favor, other than one sticking point. A little background about myself. I am a land developer and home builder, so have created and managed many HOAs, and in many conversations with our real estate attorneys, have all kind of agreed that the definition of a short-term rental is a rental of less than 6 months. You know, your typical lease agreement for a property is going to be 6 months, a year, 3 years. So it's deemed anything less than 6 months would be a short-term rental. Capping it at 30 days kind of creates a bit of an issue. You know, one of the big needs that the Airbnb serve are for families who are relocating to Raleigh, and you know, their home might not be ready for them to move into, or because of a job they have to move here a little bit earlier. So what if they need a place to stay for 6 weeks? You know, now under these rules they would have to vacate the Airbnb and find another place to stay for the remaining 2 weeks. The rest of the language I think is fantastic. Just to reiterate again, the Airbnbs or any short-term rentals do serve a great need in this time of COVID. As the previous gentleman stated, supporting small business, there are a lot of people that lost their income, and these short-term rentals have been a way for them to supplement their income and be able to keep their homes. It also has provided a way for families to be able to travel safely instead of someone coming to Raleigh and going to a hotel and having to encounter all those shared spaces and touching the counter at the entrance that everyone else touches and being in the elevator with everyone else. They can come to a home that is completely empty and they don't have to interact with anybody. They, not in the super spreader environment that everyone wants to avoid these days. So just overall, I think it's fantastic what you guys are doing. I would ask for
Drew, your time is up. I'm sorry.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Rob Buckland.
Good evening, City Council. Rob Buckland, 5443 Brandy Bay. My wife and I support this proposal, which is not limiting any maximum stays per year at short-term rentals. I commend our City Council for realizing that short-term rentals do have an important niche in Raleigh. Our short-term rentals have remained booked at about 60% over the last year with the pandemic, as we carefully expanded time between guests for aeration and higher cleaning standards. Our guests were mostly families coming to see relatives or contemplating moving here. All of our guests took advantage of local grocery and restaurant delivery services. Short-term rentals have given families a much better and safer option for staying over hotels, as he just mentioned. And as I have said before, short-term rentals do not affect our city's affordable housing. Thank you to the City Council for continuing to keep Raleigh moving forward, not backwards.
Thank you very much. Now we have one speaker in opposition. Beth, I had two names listed here, but is that Steph Mendel?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, we will hear from staff. That is 2 minutes, please.
Beth Mendel, 3225 Oak Grove Circle. I'm speaking on behalf of many Raleigh residents who are opposed to whole houses being used for short-term rentals. We are concerned about Raleigh's housing crisis, and we also are concerned about introducing commercial activity into residentially zoned neighborhoods. Every whole house and every ADU used exclusively as a short-term rental instead could be used as a long-term rental, still generate income for the owner, and be a part of the solution to Raleigh's housing crisis. In fact, you touted the importance of allowing ADUs by right everywhere as a partial solution to our housing shortage. And just this afternoon, you referenced the seriousness of our homelessness crisis. Now, no one objects to someone renting out a primary residence as a whole house short-term rental when they are away from home. That was the reason for the limited number of days allowed. After all, the sharing economy is about sharing your home, not creating a hotel. People move into residentially zoned neighborhoods because they want to create and preserve a sense of community for their families. When they find themselves living beside what essentially are hotels, that sense of community is fractured. I know that there are many responsible landlords in Raleigh, but I also am well aware that there are a number of irresponsible landlords, especially absentee landlords, who see Raleigh as an investment opportunity and care nothing about our city. Your Planning Commission has proposed some reasonable restrictions toward a compromise solution. I urge you to listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. So I am going to close the hearing, and I'm going to ask if staff, if council members have any questions. Councilmember Melton.
Mayor, I don't have a question, but I'm ready to make a motion when we're finished with the discussion. I didn't see anyone else's hand go up yet.
I do have one comment that I would like to make, and that is that we have been dealing with this issue for 5 years, perhaps a little longer. During that time, no regulations have been in place regarding short-term rentals. We also have, and we've seen the results of that. We've had minimal issues. Also, I would like to point out that one of the initiatives I signed on to was the Airbnb app, which allows us real-time access to see what is happening with Airbnb rentals. One of the things I would like to ask staff is to monitor that activity on a monthly basis, see if there are any changes. And if we do see trends that are concerning, I would ask staff to come back to us with that information. I think that's something we reiterated in committee. I just want to reiterate it here as well. We have that access to that app for that reason. It's a way for us to monitor in real time what is happening. I have nothing else to say, except I'm excited that we are finally going to put some regulations in place and move forward. Councilmember Cox.
I just want to state for the record that I am in agreement with former Council Member Mendel. And I think one of the reasons, I think we're at a point where we're going to let the genie out of the bottle. People haven't invested in short-term rentals in Raleigh because of a degree of uncertainty about our regulations. And by passing this text change, we're going to make it perfectly legal for people to begin running hotels in our neighborhoods. I think that's the wrong approach. I think people do move to Raleigh because they like our neighborhoods and the quality of life that's here. And but we're essentially taking the rails off and letting free rein. And so therefore I will not be supporting this ordinance.
Councillor Cox, I would disagree in the sense that we've had no regulation for 5 years and the rails have not come off. But anyhow, Councillor Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to offer a few comments, first acknowledging that there are concerns about this, and that those concerns, in my opinion, are rational and legitimate based on what we've seen in other cities. A lot of those cities are more tourism related. And so I appreciate the mayor providing those comments about our discussion at the committee meeting, because we did talk about some of these issues and some of the problems we might see, widespread corporate ownership of these short-term rentals, clustering of short-term rentals. But I'm not ready to assume this is going to go badly. As the mayor mentioned, we've got some new tools to monitor things, and I think our staff is well aware of the potential issues that we want to keep an eye out for. And I did want to make note, and this is my last point, I know the hour's growing late. I did want to make note that in the ordinance, a permit can be revoked and would be revoked for a violation of the criminal law, or any two violations within a year period of our zoning regulations, our noise ordinance, or our nuisance law. So certainly correct me, staff, if I'm wrong on that, but I'm reading from the ordinance, and I think this is some protections that give me enough assurances that we can give this a try and see how it goes and adjust later if we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Buffkin. Yes, 3 strikes and you're out rule. Clerk, did you have, yes, you had your hand raised.
Yes, again, we have numerous letters of support mainly for this that have been forwarded to the council for consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any more comments? Councilor Melton, will you do the honors, please?
Yeah, I just want to add, I echo the thoughts and comments of the mayor and Councilmember Buffkin. I understand that there are some concerns, but I agree that this is an industry that thrives in other places and has mostly been unregulated here. And we haven't seen some of these serious issues arise. If they do, then I think they should be addressed, but I hope that they won't. I don't think we should govern from fear, and I don't think we should create rules to create problems. So I am an advocate of this industry. I've talked to a lot of folks who are short-term rental owners who depend upon the income for things like their children's daycare or to pay their own mortgage. And so with that, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 2nd, 2021, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Stewart has seconded that. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Passes 7-1 with Councilor Cox in opposition. Clerk. With that, we have completed our agenda for this evening. Councilmember Branch.
Yeah, I have one item that's not on the agenda. I purposely didn't make this announcement earlier today because I want to wait until we're at the very end. As we know, tomorrow is February the 3rd, and on February the 3rd, our city manager will be celebrating her birthday. So I wanted to take the time to wish Marshall, happy birthday, and hopefully you have a great day, and that our notes from today will not have your meeting too long tomorrow, as I know you will probably be working on your birthday, but we do appreciate you.
Thank you very much, and I absolutely will. We'll get started at about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Marshall, happy birthday to you, and thank you for leading the team. We hope you have a great celebration with your family. And Corey, thank you for bringing that up. Good things to celebrate. Thank you. All right, with that, we can end on a happy note. Celebrating Marshall's birthday. We'll all be thinking of you tomorrow. And I want to thank everybody who signed up to speak. And I want to thank all of you for helping to move things forward this evening. Thank you so much, and everyone have a good evening.